Hi there, and welcome to Master of Horror, where I give you the scariest, true paranormal stories that I've ever come by. Please enjoy these two true, scary paranormal stories. Number 64.
Scary true story number 1. My mom's doppelganger.
I have an open mind, but I don't buy into things that easily. Most things that happen, I blame on my mind, playing tricks on me, or sleep deprivation, or simply the fact that it could be a mental illness. There is one moment though, or I suppose a few moments, that have been on my mind for some time now. While I was in the shower one day, and as water poured over my head, I heard my brother yell my name. Stacy. Stacy. The second time was louder than the first, as if something was wrong. I could have sworn I heard my dog barking as well at the same time. Annoyed but concerned, I got out and cracked the door open, then called back to him, but after waiting a few seconds there was no response. I quickly dried myself off and put on my robe, then headed downstairs asking what he needed. However, I still got no response. My dog was on her bed, fast asleep, and my brother was nowhere to be found. I looked out the window, and their car wasn't even there. This wasn't the first time my mind has decided to play these annoying games, so I didn't really think much of it. I've had auditory hallucinations before, none to that degree, but maybe they're getting worse, I thought. That's my way of trying to reason with myself, and it worked. The next time that I heard my brother yell my name calling for me loudly, I thought I was genuinely going crazy. I decided to bring it up to my brother while playing Borderlands one night. We talked about our mental health a lot because our parents don't believe in therapy, so we kind of became each other's safe haven. I explained everything that's happened over the past month, and instead of giving advice or sympathizing like he usually does, he just gets really quiet for a second until he says that he's been having the same experiences as me. Except it's been our mom yelling his name, but she's never even home when it happens. He goes to check and no one's there. This was about a month ago or two, but he also thought his mind was playing tricks on him. It seemed after that talk things began to stop. I didn't hear anything for almost 3 weeks, but then something happened that I'll never forget to this very day, and I will probably never have an explanation for what it was. I was sitting in my bed, in my room scrolling through Instagram, when my mom starts aggressively calling my name from downstairs. I've never heard her voice before. It was always my brother's, so I didn't even think anything weird of it. I was about to get up and see what she wanted, when suddenly my mom burst through the door asking me what I wanted. I didn't know what to say, but I could tell that she was annoyed by the look she gave me. She asked me again what I wanted, and I just shook my head trying to understand what was going on. Then she angrily sighed and said not to yell her name while she's making dinner, and she walked out, leaving the door open. Still in shock, I got up to close the door, but as I walked across the room, my heart stopped when I came to the realization, and I immediately ran over to the window and looked at my driveway. My mom was at work, and the car wasn't even there. I locked my door to my room and jumped on my bed. Again, there was banging on my door. I sat on my bed crying as I called my brother. I was absolutely petrified and wanted to get out of the house, but couldn't even get myself to go downstairs alone, knowing that whatever that thing was out there. My brother didn't pick up as he was at work, so I was left stuck there. I ended up locking myself in my small bathroom while I waited for either my brother or my mom to get home from work, though I knew it would be hours. Thankfully, nothing else happened until my mom got back home. I told my brother that night, and he said he never had anything like that happen to him that bad. To this day, I still have no answers as to what I was hearing and seeing, but honestly, I'm writing this and sharing it to everyone just to be able to forget about it and move on.
Scary true Paranormal story number 2, my childhood home.
This occurred when I was about 8 years old. My childhood home had a lot of issues with its past. A lot of deaths happened in the house prior to my family moving in. Most recently, the people that were renting it out to my mom and stepdad didn't want to live there because their son decided to opt out of life. And before that, a few murders even happened at the house. We didn't know the details, but that's what the landlord told us. I was young when my mom met my stepdad, and shortly after they met, they moved in together. My paranormal experiences didn't come until my baby sister came along, and that's when everything started. The house had 2 bedrooms, so I had to share a room with my baby sister, Rye. My little sister would never stop crying, and when I was young, I absolutely could not stand her. I remember this one night that I will never forget. She was crying for hours, and all of a sudden, she completely stopped. The room was dark, but I had a nightlight, so I could see a little around the room. I looked over, and I saw this shadowy figure hovering over her crib. It didn't move much, but when it did, it was slow and misty. I was petrified and hid under the covers until I eventually fell asleep. I told my parents the next day. They thought it was just my imagination. This happened so many more times of just waking up and seeing the figure by my sister's crib. It was nowhere else in the room. After a while of complaining about it, I ended up sleeping in my parents' room with my mom, while my stepdad slept in my room. But a lot more continued to happen. Shortly after I started seeing this figure, my stepdad lost his job. He was a hardworking man, so it really shocked my mom when it happened. He went through a rough depression because he really loved his job, and losing it must have been really hard on him. I remember him sitting on the couch all day, every day, just watching TV. One day, when I got home from school, I came in and saw him sitting on the couch, and a dark figure was standing right behind him. I remember it so clearly, just standing behind the couch. I didn't know what to do, so I just began to cry. My stepdad got up really quick and took me to the room to calm me down. When my mom came home, I told my parents that night of what I saw. Again, my stepdad seemed disinterested, but my mom seemed a little sympathetic. But no one really believed me. After that, there were a few good weeks where nothing happened, followed by weeks of this figure hanging around, usually either by Rye or my stepdad. Some nights, when I slept in my room, I'd hear a voice. It was a woman's voice. It was real deep, just talking to Rye. I never understood the words coming from it, but it terrified me every time. As Rye got older and began to walk and talk, I noticed she spent a lot more time in that room talking to her so-called friend, the dark shadow. I knew what it was. The more this figure seemed to hang around, the worse the emotions in the house got. My sister would seem to never talk to anyone else. My mom had so much anger inside of her, and my stepdad was always depressed, and I was alone all the time. Then my parents started fighting all the time, screaming things at each other. My mom hated my stepdad for not keeping down a job, and my stepdad was just a depressed mess. They seemed to fight every single night, and every night it got worse. While in my room, I even heard my stepdad telling my mom to put the knife down. But the worst time of all was when I was in the living room watching TV. It wasn't that late, maybe 8:30 p.m. or so, and my stepdad was asleep on the couch while my mom was in her room. I was starting to get tired, and I turned off the TV and walked upstairs to my room. At the top of the stairs, though, I started to hear whispering, followed by speaking back to the whispers. The door was cracked open a few inches, and I slowly walked over to look inside. Just a couple of steps away from the door, I walked over to the door, and I looked inside, and that's when I saw a figure, and that's when I could see Rye next to this figure, as if it was trying to lead her somewhere. I screamed, and instantly the door slammed by itself. I just stood there screaming and crying before my mom rushed out of the room. I just pointed at the door, unable to make out any words. She tried to open it, but it was locked. It was one of those cheaper ones, though, to where she could use her fingernail to open it. She pushed it open, and Rye was in the corner of the room facing the wall. My mom yelled at her for locking the door, even though Rye was way too short to reach the doorknob. Rye didn't have any sort of reaction on her face. After that, I fell into a small depression, along with what seemed like the rest of the family. No one talked to each other. I became the one taking care of my baby sister. Me and the strange figure I became familiar with. It even started hanging around my bed during nights when I was extra sad. And it brought me a sort of weird comfort, knowing that I wasn't alone. Eventually, my mom had enough of my dad and we left to stay with my grandparents. I remember her telling us to pack up, and as we headed to the car, I saw the figure again, standing right behind my dad. I felt sad leaving him, but at least he wouldn't truly be alone.